Hello YouTube and YouTube subscribers. Today I'm going to do a quick video discussing an interesting topic, and that is how long can fish live? For example, in this tank, of course, you only have one type of fish. All we got are guppies. Now, guppies, under normal circumstances, generally speaking, live probably about 6 months or so. But they can live to 2 years, and in fact, with female guppies, if you keep female guppies away from males for their entire life and they never become pregnant, they will actually grow significantly larger. They'll actually grow sometimes up to 4 inches long, and they'll kind of end up looking much more like their cousin the molly. In that case, if you keep female guppies away from males their whole life, because they don't become pregnant constantly, they can actually live for about 4 or 5 years in that situation. But when you're looking at fish, because the term fish is such a broad term, it's like a really broad taxa. It's like saying mammal. Like, for example, I'm a mammal, a blue whale's a mammal, a cat's a mammal, a dog's a mammal, sheep's a mammal, etc. But with fish, for example, the fish we keep in aquariums, they have a large variance in lifespans just because there's so many different species. And for example, some families of fish tend to live longer, others not so much. And sometimes even closely related fish can have pretty different lifespans. A good example of this would be, for example, some of the Grammies, for example, betas, paradise fish, dwarf Grammies, they tend to live only about 2-3 years. Yet, in the larger species, for example, you can have giant Grammies live for 20 plus years. And there's even fish in Africa that are related to Grammies called the bushfish, or the climbing perch family. They can live up to 40 years. And that has to do due to genetic factors and, like, for example, growth rates and that. But, for instance, obviously environment affects how a fish will age and how long it will live. For example, these guppies, if you make guppies mature faster, i.e. you keep them in really warm water, you speed up their pregnancies, the young will develop faster, but then their lifespan will be shortened. So, for example, they'll only live for a few months after they're born. But but generally speaking, most of the fish that we have in aquariums, if they're smaller fish, they're going to live probably 1 to 5 years, and then if they're larger, they're going to live longer, generally speaking. But there are some exceptions. For example, the Corydoras catfish that I have in my aquarium, they've been documented living for 27 years, and yet those fish are only about 2-3 inches long. And then yet a Plecostomus, for example, the Pleco I own, is 14 years old, and Plecos are generally documented to live for 15 plus years, especially for larger ones. Smaller ones, such as the little Oto catfish, tend to only live for a few years. But cichlids are another example of that, where you have your smaller cichlids often live for about 8 years or so. Larger ones can live for a decade plus, maybe in 2 decades. But then some that are small ones, such as Romanzes, often only live about 2 years, yet a similar size Carbensis can live up to 8 years. And that depends. Remember, to get the best lifespan out of fish, you gotta make sure it's fed well, make sure it's maintained in a proper environment and all that. But that being said, regardless of how well you take care of your fish, some of them might die early, some of them might live longer than you expect, and also the species of fish is a key factor of that. Interestingly, some of the longest living organisms on Earth are fish. For example, the oldest known vertebrate is a Greenland shark, and it's estimated to be 400 to 500 years old. Another example of really long-lived fish are rough-eyed rockfish. They can live for hundreds of years, 200 years plus. And that has to do, a lot of that has to do with metabolism and simply stuff like genetics and all that. So thanks for watching. Please rate, comment, and subscribe.